the second paragraph says, the problem with evil in the Psalms is primarily theological. It inevitably concerns questions about God. Thus, the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple is seen principally as the divine scandal because it provides an opportunity for the heathen to blaspheme God. God's inheritance, the people of Israel, is the sign of his divine election and covenant that will never fail. The concept of God's inheritance also contains an end-time dimension, as one day all nations will become God's inheritance and will serve him. The notion that the nations invaded God's inheritance threatens these divine promises. I think that the lesson is pulling on a truth here that the problem of evil is primarily theological. It concerns questions about God. I think that's well said. And Satan lies to undermine our confidence in God. And the lesson, though, suggests there's questions that need answering. And then the lesson makes a suggestion in the fourth paragraph of the lesson about the questions that need answering. And here's what the lesson suggests. However, more important than the restoration of Israel's fortunes is the defense of God's character in the world. If the evil actions of the nations go unpunished, it will appear that God has lost his power. Only when God saves his people will his name be justified and uplifted. Now, the lesson's absolutely right to focus our attention on God's character. Absolutely correct. But what character does the lesson suggest God has? And is presenting God as a punishing God who will inflict punishment, as the lesson suggests, actually defending God's true character? Or is that misrepresenting God and supporting Satan's charges against God? Are we advancing God's kingdom by presenting him as a punishing God? Or are we advancing Satan's kingdom? The lesson suggests.
No, if God was a punishing God, he would have gotten rid of Satan immediately.
Well said. So let's look at Desire of Ages 761. In the opening of the great controversy, Satan had declared that the law of God could not be obeyed, that justice was inconsistent with mercy, and that should the law be broken, it would be impossible for the sinner to be pardoned. Every sin must meet its punishment, urged Satan, and that if God should remit the punishment of sin, he would not be a God of truth and justice. So Satan's version of a God of truth and justice is a God who punishes sin. He's a punishing God. So when you present God as powerful punisher, you are actually misrepresenting the character of God. It's a lie. And this is exactly what happened since 1888 in our church, because we rejected design law and we've doubled down on a Roman view of law. And instead of the church institution teaching the final message of mercy, we have advanced Romanism. Here's a couple of quotes from one of the founders of the church along these lines. Check these out about this question of God's character and punishment. This is Selected Message, Volume 1, 235. We are not to regard God as waiting to punish the sinner for his sin. The sinner brings the punishment upon himself. His own actions start a train of circumstance that bring the sure result. Every act of transgression reacts upon the sinner, works in him a change of character, makes it more easy for him to transgress again. By choosing to sin, men separate themselves from God, cut themselves off from the channel of blessing, and the sure result is ruin and death. What laws is this author advancing and advocating? What happens? What is the natural consequence of sin? We destroy our own selves. This is design law. And if we regard God as the punisher, then we're promoting Satan's kingdom of imposed law. We worship a creature, not the creator. Here's a quote out of Great Controversy, page 35. The Jews had forged their own fetters. They had filled for themselves the cup of vengeance. In the utter destruction that befell them as a nation, and in all the woes that followed them in their dispersion, they were but reaping the harvest which their own hands had sown. Says the prophet, O Israel, thou hast destroyed thyself, for thou hast fallen by thine iniquity. Their sufferings are often represented as punishment visited upon them by the direct decree of God. It is thus that the great deceiver seeks to conceal his own work. By stubborn rejection of divine love and mercy, the Jews had caused the protection of God to be withdrawn from them, and Satan was permitted to rule them according to his will. The horrible cruelties enacted in the destruction of Jerusalem are a demonstration of Satan's vindictive power over those who yield to his control. What did the lesson just tell us? That God had to use power to punish. Whoa, this is Satan, this method. We can't defend God. And notice, it is thus that the great deceiver seeks to conceal his own work by teaching that it's just and right to inflict punishment upon the disobedient. And then Testimonies, Volume 5, 738. From the beginning, it has been Satan's studied plan to cause men to forget God, that they might secure them to himself. Hence, he has sought to misrepresent the character of God, to lead men to cherish a false conception of him. The Creator has been presented to their minds as clothed with the attributes of the Prince of Evil, as arbitrary, that's someone who makes up rules, like our laws, made up rules, severe and unforgiving. You have to punish. You cannot forgive. There must be somebody take the penalty. If we don't punish you, I got to punish Jesus. I can't forgive it. And this is exactly what the lesson is teaching. It's so sad. Because they accept the lie that God's law functions like human law. If anyone believes that lie, it always results in teaching that God is required by law and justice to use his power to inflict punishment for sin. Because if he doesn't do it, there is no justice. They're trapped, and there's no way out for them as long as they hold to God's law functions like human law. If you think about human law, it's unfair. It's not right to not enforce the law. And that's how they think. And that's why they always teach this. And then they'll then bring in all these layers of confused, contradictory stuff. But he loved us too much, so he sent Jesus to live sinlessly and then to inflict punishment upon an innocent person to make sure the punishment gets paid. But then he'll declare the guilty to be innocent if they claim a blood payment from the innocent, and we'll call that justice. It's so convoluted and contradictory to reality. It's really, really, really sick.